mission of our company is we want girls to stay playing sports longer. And they're going to do that if they have better coaches. They're going to do that if they have more passion, more understanding for the game. First fall ball game freshman year, I get the start. So I start at center midfield. 5 minutes into the game, I tear my ACL. And it was horrible.
No.
That's like the exciting thing about coaching, right? It's strategic and emotional. You want kids to want it. And luckily, I have an amazing group here in Evergreen that wants to compete, and they have the skills to back it. That's amazing, right? To coach D1 athletes, to coach D2 athletes, to coach D3 athletes, people who are playing with it, or people who I trained to be referees who are in college, who are still reffing, right? Like that's part of the coaching of influence, right? So our high school team, not to brag, we were state champions this past season in 24 in the 4A division. And we also won the state championship in 2021. Everyone watches women's sports, and now I can get women's sports on TV.
To your point, how have you seen women's sports expand and grow in the right direction? And are there additional things that still needs to be done even right now in modern day that can move things forward even further?
Thank you, Caitlin Clark. Like what Iowa basketball, their run last year, her entry into the WNBA has been one of the most incredible women's sports things to watch. Last year, there was like a teacher who said her 4th grade boys were pretending like on the playground to be like, oh, Caitlin Clark with the 3. And you're like, wow, like if young boys are imitating like a female athlete, like that is just incredible. Just blown away with more eyes on women's sports, more appreciation for the nuances of the game. Also, it kind of brings up a lot of the disparity and inequality that can kind of exist in sports.
So you gotta tell me, now that you've done it, what's the formula for a championship? Like, what are the big things that scream out to you through those moments that's like, that's the formula to win it all?
What are the common denominators? And it's like leaders who care, right? Leaders who are getting the whole team on board. And then it's your bench. It's like the magic of the kids that don't play, that cheer and keep you in it and are so positive. They're the lifeblood, right? So if you can keep those kids grateful and excited and passionate, you're much harder to be stopped. And so I think our bench this past season was one of the best benches I've ever seen anywhere. And that gives me chills as I say it. It's like, whew. And I bring back the entire team. I graduated 2 seniors, so we're coming for it. And I did read, you're not defending a championship, you're out chasing another one.
All right, you amazing humans. We have another great Coaching Corner episode with Coach Rachel Sanford. We appreciate you being on this show. I can't wait for all the insights and the tips and the hacks and all the things to help us optimize our performance emotionally, mentally, physically, and all the things. I can't wait to get into it. Rachel, thank you so much for being on the show.
Awesome. I'm really happy to be here. Thank you, Troy.
So, Rachel, if you don't mind, tell us a little bit about yourself, what's your background, and how you got to be who you are now.
I'm the current head girls lacrosse coach at Evergreen High School in Colorado. I have been in that position since 2019. I grew up playing lacrosse and a lot of sports in Connecticut. I swam, I played ice hockey, water polo, soccer, tennis, skiing, anything you could name it. If I could play, I was on board. Through high school, I kind of started to realize lacrosse was just becoming a huge favorite and our team was really good. And that's where I was getting kind of the most recruiting attention. And so that took me to Duke University in North Carolina. And so I went to Duke in the fall of 2003, and not to date myself, but kind of got on campus, was loving the first couple weeks of fall ball, getting the hang of the game. First fall ball game freshman year, I get the start. So I start at center midfield. 5 minutes into the game, I tear my ACL. And it was horrible.
No.
Yeah. So,
okay.
yeah, it was very emotional. It was very upsetting. And, I spent I redshirted. I spent a year, doing everything to get back on the field. And it really taught me a lot of perspective about being on the bench, how to work hard, how to train, all those intangibles that I'd never really faced in my career to that point. Came back from that injury, had a great career. We went to 3 Final Fours, never made it to that final game. So it does kind of hurt a little. My teammates are my best friends. I still talk to my former coaches. I'm so proud of, watching the Duke team. Now, my husband and I own a restaurant in Kittredge, which is a small town between Evergreen and Morrison. And so for a while, I was like, how can we be more involved in the community? And I got to know some of the families through the local rec program and coaching club. Finally, after enough badgering, I was like, okay, I'll do it. And I absolutely fell in love with coaching high school. Through high school, through college, I was coaching a little bit, doing private lessons and coaching a little bit of club lacrosse. Out of college, I worked for the Hillstone Restaurant Group, and so kind of got on a restaurant management track. And restaurants are very much like sports teams. Everybody has a role, you're working together, you're putting on a show, which would be like the equivalent of a game. And so I fell in love with restaurants, how fast-paced they were. Kind of took a break from sports as I got my career off the ground. After a couple years, I was like, I like this, but I want something more. While I was working part-time managing the Cherry Creek Grill in Denver, I got my MBA at the University of Denver. And so my focus was in organizational development and performance management. I was looking for jobs that would take my background and kind of, move it forward. And so I ended up working for a big lacrosse brand, starting and running their girls side. I was like, this is great. I love the kids. I love the coaching. Don't love parents necessarily as the client. And so after that, I kind of bounced around with a couple other restaurant groups doing more operational and like leadership development type work, which led me into doing my own kind of consulting. As the consulting business was kind of taking off, I was like, oh, I have time for coaching. I decided to kind of push that high school coaching forward in 2019. I've just been loving it ever since. So our high school team, not to brag, we were state champions this past season in 24 in the 4A division. And we also won the state championship in 2021.
Well, congrats to you and your team. That's
Thank
bragging
you.
rights forever. That's life-changing forever.
It was a come from behind kind of victory versus a rival who beat us last year in a very similar game. So it felt even more, satisfying.
Ooh, the story dynamics, and then maybe we can go a little bit deeper in that a little bit later. Oh, I'm just relishing it as a sports fan right now. I love that you broke down your transition and your journey. I think for those who are watching and listening, they can understand you can still have a very successful career in sports that's transferable outside of sports. I'd love to dive in deeper on, you mentioned on a lot of things on operational things from that. What correlations have you seen from your time as an athlete and even as a coach that you transfer over into operational leadership?
I think a lot of the key life skills of how do you show respect? How do you give respect? How do you communicate clearly? How do you win others over to kind of get on board for a common mission? And so at Evergreen, the culture that we're creating is really a culture around success. And that starts with like how you line up your bags, how you introduce yourself as an athlete. And those things are really important to me to kind of make sure that at the end of the day, my athletes are leaving with an experience of, I learned something. I'm a little bit better as a human and a lacrosse player, but it was fun while we did it. And so I think, in restaurants, there's a lot of times like the nitty gritty of service or details or cleanliness, and you can't disregard those, right? They help build your foundation. If you have a strong foundation, you can kind of weather bigger shifts, harder shifts, more stuff that you want to do.
When you think back, even if you don't mind, I love to sit with the moment of tearing your ACL. And in that moment, did it feel like the world was over? Oh my goodness. Could you take us back to that moment and give reflection on that if you don't mind?
Absolutely. A couple of factors. It was at George Mason University on a really kind of raggedy grass field. And I was guarding Coco Stanwyck, who was a friend, and she juked one way and I went the other, and I heard my knee pop. And I was like, oh my God. And so I knew it was bad pretty immediately. I was hopeful it wasn't as bad as I was thinking. One of the telltale signs is kind of how swollen you get when, after you're done, and my knee just got really swollen. And we were busing back to Durham from Virginia. And I'd been talking about where I was going to go to college, how much success I was going to have on the field. Like, my parents and I were obsessed with it for years. And it came, that moment was here. And it felt like, hold up, pause, you're going to have to wait. And so at the time, I would have said, I didn't think athletes came back from that injury. I thought it was a career ender. The more you learn about it, it's very common, especially with women. That season we had a couple other women tear theirs. And after you've torn it, you can kind of tell when somebody tears theirs. You just like have a feeling. It still sickens me when somebody's like, I tore my ACL. I like have a visceral reaction of like, I'm so sorry. Like, it sucks. I wouldn't wish it on anybody. But it also, at 18, taught me a lot. It taught me how to recover, how to listen to your body, how to push through, how to be on the sideline, which was a role I'd never really experienced. And so it ultimately, I think my career was better for it because of that perspective, but absolutely brutal to kind of go through it. And I wouldn't wish it on anybody.
So, you hear the tropes and the allegories of just people telling, push through. They saw these things, they reference other people. I mean, when you're in it and you're an athlete, a star caliber
Yeah.
athlete with dreams, and what voices actually matter to you? What things actually help you get through that time?
I think positivity really does help people on the other side of like, you're moving forward. Like, hey, we're not doing a full cycle on the bike yet, but you're close, right? And so kind of measuring those small steps. I had some great athletic trainers at Duke who just were encouraging, right? Like, you wanted to show up, you wanted to work hard for them. It was hard for me, like at first, like the jealousy thing of my friends who were playing and having success and not injured. I just, I didn't want to be injured, right? And so you learn how to be a better teammate and like, hey, why am I jealous, right? I don't need to compare my path to theirs, and I need to worry about me. And I think that's really good to learn your first time on the bench, right? You're not counting other people's mistakes. You're cheering, right? You're involved. You're invested. That was a lot of off-field maturity that had to happen. And it took months to kind of handle the initial heartbreak, but it does, it's brutal, but it's recoverable, right? And I think there's so many injuries that when you're young and healthy, like, you can really bounce back if you want to.
If there was anything you would tell yourself in that moment now, what would that be?
Some of it is like, have some other interest. Like, I was just so obsessed with talking about lacrosse and playing lacrosse, always making sure you have some other interests and some other passions and some other outlets, because when that's taken away overnight, it's how do you release some of the energy that you have? And, you can get some of that lifting weights or pushing, working with a trainer. But, if you have like music or art or something, or it kind of lessens the blow. And then I think the other big thing is, don't be afraid to ask for help. I was a freshman, and so it was like meeting all my friends now. And so you're on crutches. Like, how do you get food at the dining hall? And that was kind of uncomfortable at first. I'm just like, you know what? People who ask for help, everybody's willing to help, right? Usually. So ask for it, because you'll probably get more than what you wanted in just asking.
Now let's talk about the comeback story. Everybody loves a great comeback story, and you have a few of them, both as an athlete and as a coach. So I would love to dive in deep. How did it feel on the other side of that?
I feel like the game was at Maryland my sophomore year after coming back from injury, and I'd seen a hypnotist. I'd seen, a lot of stuff just to like give myself extra advantage when I got back out there. And I hit the ground running. Like, I was wearing a brace. It was a little clunky, but I felt good. I looked good. I played well. And it was satisfying. It was like every hour of rehab, every hour of just, oh, this sucks, was gone, right? When you can get back to doing what you love. And that feeling is so powerful, right? Even just saying that like brings me back to that turf field at Maryland. And like, I can just think of the jersey we were wearing. And yeah, it felt good. Really good.
Let's zoom out, right? So we've been talking about you as a player, you come back as a player, and now you're coaching.
Yeah.
Does it influence how you coach your star players or just your players in general from those experiences? And if so, what does that look like?
A couple big things come out there is I really try to teach my athletes to listen to their body. to trust their body. Like self-care is so important, especially with high schoolers. You're like, hey, is this a busy week? When are finals? Like who's had their mid-season pedicure? Who's, sleeping enough every night? And you just got to kind of remind, like I have a star player that doesn't drink enough water. And I'm like, come on, you got to get over this, right? And so you're there to kind of teach the simple, but also like drill it into them so it becomes kind of something they then believe in. In lacrosse, you can score a goal in 7 seconds. In college, we lost a 7-goal lead in the final 4. And so like it can happen, right? So that part as a coach can make me optimistic, but also a little fearful. And so you need to make sure like your finger's on the pulse. We're not giving up. Stuff can kind of change. And so the championship we won this past spring was that. We were down by 2 with 8 minutes left. They were stalling the ball. The message is just like, we're still in it. Like we're cheering. We're not giving up. Good body language, shoulders back. And then we got the tie up goal and it's like, Coach, what are we doing? I'm like, oh God, I didn't think we were going to be here. That's like the exciting thing about coaching, right? It's strategic and emotional. You want kids to want it. And luckily, I have an amazing group here in Evergreen that wants to compete, and they have the skills to back it.
This may be a tough question, so we're gonna see how this goes. Do you prefer yourself as an athlete, or do you prefer your current time now as a coach more in your mind?
Ooh. There's some times where I would die to play, right? The big game, the under the lights, the like, we need a goal. I do like some officiating also. And when I ref like the women's league in Denver, I'm like, oh, I want to play. Like I want this, at coming up on 40, it's like, it's too hard. I love coaching. I love how it allows me to like release a lot of my competitive spirit, but nothing beats playing.
What's the transition like as a former athlete who becomes a coach? Like, what is that transition? Was it hard for you? Was it easier for you?
I think it was hard at first to realize like you're not often going to coach players like yourself, right? Just in the sense of I know what I like, I know how I am, I know how I act. Humans bring all these different things to the field. Coaching elementary school or really, really young levels, that's really hard for me. And now as like a mom with young kids, it's like, oh, I'll catch you like in middle school once you've like learned more of the game. But there's a lot of parts of coaching that are so nostalgic in high school, right? Like every year they have prom, every year it's graduation. And so you get kind of hooked on this and it just brings back memories. It brings back that point in time. And so I loved my career. Like now there's the pro league and there's, lacrosse is going to be in Olympics. Box lacrosse is happening for women. So if that had been 20 years ago, I think there'd be a different opportunity, but I love what I'm doing now. I love that I'm still involved in lacrosse.
One thing that I sit with sometimes when you look at athletes, and I love how you brought this out, keep in mind that we're more than just an athlete. There's more identities to you. There's more sides to you. And you need to keep that at the forefront as well and relevant because you never know what is in store for your life. When you look at your life, how is important is family and how is important those other identities to your cultivation and development?
My coach in college, who's the current coach at Notre Dame, Chris, she had this picture on, I think, Facebook, but it was like her son running out to her and she's like embracing him. You see like the winning scoreboard behind it. And I saw her picture, her son's like in high school or early college now. So it was a long time ago. I always had been like, I want that picture, right? I want my kid running to me after a game and just like, Mom, I'm here. And I got it. It took a lot of time and a lot of like my husband, I'm like, try to get this picture. And finally we got it, at our championship game this year. And I think my kids, my husband, they're involved in our program. They come to stuff, they root for us. But at the end of the day, like they don't care. If we win or lose, like I still need to be mom and do bedtime. And I think you need to just kind of have that perspective of what matters. And so I love coaching. I'm excited to coach my kids at some point. I hope they love lacrosse. If they don't, I just hope they find their own thing that they love that we can kind of be a part of. And that's easier to say now as a mom than when like you have a kid and you're thinking about having kids and you're like, I want them to be a star athlete. And it's like, you can't control that, right? So it's better just to enjoy and kind of control what you can control.
Do you tend to see a lot of things in your players like yourself?
Yeah, definitely. I think sometimes they feel so young, and so it's hard to like think back in a sense. You know, the average 16-year-old girl or 15-year-old girl out here, they're like excited to get their license, right? Like that's a bigger deal than learning the new play on the offense. And so it does keep stuff top of mind when you're like, yeah, that does matter. I don't think you should miss practice to get your permit because I care about our team. I care about excellence. But a 16-year-old cares about that, right? It does bring back, priorities. And I think when you're an elite competitor, like your priorities are different than, somebody who's just a high school lacrosse player. But you need to be able to kind of figure out how to get the average lacrosse player on board with the elite players. And at Evergreen, I've had a few athletes over the years who are playing at the next level. And that's amazing, right? To coach D1 athletes, to coach D2 athletes, to coach D3 athletes, people who are playing with it, or people who I trained to be referees who are in college, who are still reffing, right? Like that's part of the coaching of influence, right? And so that's really fun to see how kids are still in the game, even beyond their high school career.
So you got to tell me, now that you've done it, what's the formula for a championship? Like, what are the big things that scream out to you through those moments that's like, that's the formula to win it all?
Both the seasons that we won our championship, one of them we were just, not to brag, but we were just better than everybody we played that year. We were stacked. Great goalie, great defense, great midfield, great attack. It was special, like on paper, and then just like the work ethic of the team. That was the season post-COVID. So everybody had lost a year of high school sports. And so that senior class, like they wanted it, right? They wanted to compete. They wanted to be there. They really brought the energy day in and day out. This past season, it felt like everything was really fun. It was light. We'd lose games, but we were in them. Everything just kind of went along. At the beginning of the season, we'd be competing for a championship, but it would be like a nice win. So it was like unexpected, right? Those two experiences of winning were just so different. I think that's what's so special is what are the common denominators? And it's like leaders who care, right? Leaders who are getting the whole team on board. And then it's your bench. It's like the magic of the kids that don't play, that cheer and keep you in it and are so positive. They're the lifeblood, right? So if you can keep those kids grateful and excited and passionate, you're much harder to be stopped. And so I think our bench this past season was one of the best benches I've ever seen anywhere. And that gives me chills as I say it. It's like, whew. And I bring back the entire team. I graduated 2 seniors, so we're coming for it. And I did read, you're not defending a championship. You're out chasing another one.
I like that. I like that. Ooh, they come in. Let's come on. Let's do it. Let's do it.
Let's go. I know.
I'm
Go
here
Cougs.
for it. Woo! Yeah. Shifting gears a little bit. I know you are developing other assets and other things. I love for us to talk about what those assets are and how they're meant to be applicable to the audience.
Yeah, of course. So in business school at DU, I met my business partner, Liz Alley, now Liz Carter, and she's been a softball coach pretty much since I've met her. And so we've really just connected over the years talking about the trials and tribulations of coaching high school athletes and like, listen to this story or I need a pep talk. And probably about 5 years ago, I kind of came up with an idea for a team building card game. We made some cards, we did some beta testing, and every time we did it, it felt like, wow, that was a magical thing. And so in Colorado, like our spring season is terrible. The weather is absolutely awful. So the amount of times that we get, canceled because of snow or rain, like we have all these times where it's like, okay, you were going to be outside, but now you got to go into the inside or in the gym or in the chemistry classroom. And it's like, how do you make this worthwhile? And so Rain Delay is our team building game. And the premise is you have 2 types of cards, a chat card and a challenge card. And a chat card really gets players to connect, to talk, to be vulnerable. And the challenge cards are getting our athletes to be leaders, right? read the card and get everybody to kind of do it. And so what's really special is it's not just for starters, right? It's not just for the stars on the field. It's every player gets a card. So it really makes everybody's voice the same. And it's a fun way to connect. So often at a tournament or before practice, like kids are glued to their phones, right? Or kids are being clicky. And so this really kind of levels the playing ground in a really fun and light way. And so super proud of the game and super proud of, giving coaches a resource to help them, right? Coaches want a team build, but they don't sometimes know how. And so this is an easy kind of off the shelf method that works for all ages, all groups, and you really get a ton out of it.
Well, congrats to you and Liz for working on this for, I believe, 5+ years and getting this off the ground. I believe it's not just the cards too. You have other things you're
So we
building as well,
have
correct?
this is the caveat is Liz has a 6-year-old daughter and I have a 4.5-year-old son. So between her fall season and my spring season and kids and babies and weddings, it was crazy. We also came up with the athlete journal. And it's 99 prompts for athletes to take control of their mental game. And so there's questions on here of like, why did you start playing? Why do you still play? Describe your relationship with your coach. What do you like or dislike? And it just makes kids be intentional, right? Answer a question. Think about it. There's no wrong answers. And I've learned from having a regular journaling practice that when you get something out on paper, it takes it out of like your cluttered brain, right? And so in giving this to my athletes and other coaches, I was like, I'm giving the athlete journal to a coach. And like somebody like me, I still feel like I'm an athlete, but you kind of relate to it a little bit differently. So then we did a coach's journal. And so the coach's journal is similar to the athlete, but it asks more questions like, why do you coach? Explain your coaching philosophy. And just having this, it allows you to think, what do I care about, right? In the scheme of a season and the X's and O's, a lot of stuff can get lost. And I think if you can quiet your mind and focus on like, what do you want to get out of it? If you're intentional, if you can kind of pinpoint, you have more enjoyment, you have more success. And so, our mission of our company is we want girls to stay playing sports longer. And they're going to do that if they have better coaches. They're going to do that if they have more passion, more understanding for the game. And it really works for, it's targeted towards team sports, but a lot of the stuff works for like individual sports as well.
It's incredibly important to see examples like yourself and Liz who are showing, look at all the hats we're wearing. And we're still getting things done and making an impact.
Yes, right.
To your point, how have you seen women's sports expand and grow in the right direction? And are there additional things that still needs to be done even right now in modern day that can move things forward even further?
Thank you, Caitlin Clark. Like what Iowa basketball, their run last year, her entry into the WNBA has been one of the most incredible women's sports things to watch. Last year, there was like a teacher who said her 4th grade boys were pretending like on the playground to be like, oh, Caitlin Clark with the 3. And you're like, wow, like if young boys are imitating like a female athlete, like that is just incredible. Just blown away with more eyes on women's sports, more appreciation for the nuances of the game. Also, it kind of brings up a lot of the disparity and inequality that can kind of exist in sports. But also, like, everyone watches women's sports. And now I can get women's sports on TV. I can stream more women's lacrosse games than I want, which is amazing. In college, growing up, if you wanted to watch lacrosse, your option was you could watch the NCAA final game on Memorial Day every year, the men's. That was the only option you had. And so to see more women on TV is amazing. I think also this summer at the Paris Olympics, I was blown away by the rugby player Alona, who just talk about body positivity, talk about being a role model, embracing who you are. That messaging was just incredible. And I think there's so many of our youth, there's so many of our girls that need to hear that message. So excited that that's where we're at currently with, women in sports. I think there's still room for more parity, more opportunity, but since Title IX, there has just been so much improvement that I'm a benefit of. And it's really exciting that you can see most professional women's sports on some sort of streaming service.
It's definitely growing and it's exciting. And I think even as men, as advocates, you even like yourself, what you're doing is still showing where we can improve and other
Right.
areas where we can make a bigger impact all the way through. And even at the Olympics, it was the first time in Olympic history, it was 50-50 split.
Yeah. Yeah.
Amazing. Simply
Amazing.
amazing. When the New York Liberty won their first WNBA title, Sabrina's shoes are selling out. It's not
Right.
just a PR. This is real,
Yeah.
competitive. It sells. People want it.
Yeah, I think they said in the women's and men's Final Four for basketball last spring, there was more females on social media, like garnering attention and NIL deals. And it's like, yeah, because women are smart.
Is there any quick tips you would give to a woman who maybe has a kid and is trying to walk your path and do all the things? Is there any hacks, or is there, if any, that you would suggest that someone to do to start doing those other things?
Well, one of the best things about coaching high school girls is you have 25 babysitters who love kids, love to make a little cash. And so that's been a great kind of resource for us. I think with kids, you need to make sure that they're taken care of, right? And so childcare is one of those big issues and big stressors. And so, when Wilbur, my 4-year-old, was a baby, like I'd just bring him and be like, who's not going to push a cute little baby in his stroller at a warm fall ball game? Gets a little harder with 2 kids, but it's like, don't be afraid to ask for help. You need, all these people who have high school girls, they remember like they had babies. And so they like to be around it. And so kind of use your village in a way that, works for you and your family.
It's been such a refreshing conversation. We talked about comeback stories. We talked about winning that, find those chips. Ooh, how you want more. The transition from a pro athlete to a coach, how you transferred that into business and entrepreneurship. And you and Liz are making these dynamic journals for athletes, for coaches, the rain delay cards. Oh my goodness. Is there anything else that you have on the ticket that y'all are working on?
Oh, this is where we're trying to start, right? And really launch and just get people using it, right? Add more value. Female coaches, especially, stay coaching longer. And I'm like, living proof. I'm like, I've got 2 kids now. Like, you can do it. You got to prioritize. You need a village, but you can still coach high school. Keeping women in sports is our big mission.
If they want to buy what you're selling,
Yeah.
what are the
So we
links?
are.
Where can they go to buy these things?
Yeah, that's a great idea. I should send you the links. So we're on Amazon and we have an Etsy store. Yeah, we're trying to kind of target really club directors, athletic directors, coaches, state associations, just people with a little bit more buying power who would see like the value for their whole team or their whole club or their whole student body.
And if people want to connect with you, follow your journey on maybe getting the chip again, where can they find you?
Yes, absolutely. So we're on social media. We're on TikTok and Instagram as Rain Delay for teams. And then my personal Instagram, it's Raycheezy, Rachheezie. And then I'm on LinkedIn as Rachel Sanford. Our restaurant is called Switchback Smokehouse. So I love, wearing lacrosse gear to the restaurant and just bragging to anybody who comes in about my high school team up here in Evergreen.
You know what I love about this whole thing? You are validating multi-potentialites. We can do multiple things very well and be happy. We don't have to give it up. We can do it all.
Yeah, it's called a portfolio of careers, and you got to make it work for you.
Come on with it. Come on with it. Well, Rachel, we thank you so much for your time.
Yes,
The audience thanks you, and I'm sure it was so valuable to everyone watching and listening.
awesome. Thank you so much.